الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وآله وصحبه. أما بعد, my dear brothers and sisters, my dear children and grandchildren, my dear brother, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much indeed for coming today. The topic we are going to talk about is something very important to all of us, because it's going to affect our own children and grandchildren. It's our responsibility to deliver the truth to the people, irrespective of whatever opposition we may face in life. You are all the messengers of the messenger. Each one of us, Rasul Rasulillah. You are the messenger of the messenger. You are going to deliver the message. You are going to make an effort to understand it. You will develop the style, the right style to deliver it. You will face opposition. You will face threats. You will be injured. But you cannot change your ideas. No way. Whatever is halal, whatever is permissible, whatever is allowed, we will do it. And we will promote it. Whatever is wrong, we will resist it. Not violently. Use your tongue, use your pen. But before we do that, let us educate ourselves regarding what are we going to say, what are we going to do. Few weeks ago, I delivered 2 talks to cover this topic. They are available on our website, they are available on our app. Very often, if I'm attending a multi-faith forum meeting, or a community meeting, or a police meeting, I would be targeted by a member of the LGBT team attending the meeting. He will single me out from everyone else. He will say, "Oh, Dr. Fahim, what is the Islamic view regarding homosexuality?" And I would say, "Why do you ask him? Ask the rabbi there. Ask the rabbi." So I'm going to read a very short, it's all available on our website and on the app as a PDF as well. So I'm going to read it in order not to waste any time. What is the Islamic view regarding homosexuality? In this article, I provide guidance to my fellow Muslims as to how to respond to this question, which is often posed by people with the intention to provoke division and discord. Very often Muslims answer along the lines of, God prohibited it in the Quran and condemns those who practice it. This response can generate ill feelings towards Muslims and Islamophobia. An alternative, prudent approach would be to begin with the position set out in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is a canonical text for the Jews. It has also been accepted as a canonical text by the Christians. Muslims are also instructed to have regard to it. Answering the question by reference to the Old Testament is therefore establishing common ground for the people of the book. Having established the common ground, we can appropriately contextualize the references in the Quran. When Allah, the author and publisher of all divine revelations, mentioned in the Quran the fate of the people of Lut, it was like copy from his first book and paste into his final book. So it was not something new which belongs to Muslims only. I am giving below a link identifying the relevant verses in the Old Testament and the Bible which refer to homosexuality. Practicing Jews or Christians or Muslims would fully adhere to Allah's commands regarding his ruling on homosexuality as detailed in his divine revelations. Having said so, we should not discriminate against anyone because of his or her sexuality. We don't discriminate against anyone. God created us all equal. He imbued us with so many faculties and gave us free will. Everyone is responsible for their own actions or choices. But no one should claim that God created him as homosexual. No such thing. We know that some churches have accepted same-sex marriage and the appointment of gay priests. This is their choice. And Islamic institutions should not follow their example. Should never. There is a mosque in California for gay people. You can search it. The imam is gay, the congregation are gay, but we say no to it. We say no to it. It must be made clear that we have no right to judge one another. The only judge is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and the earth and everything seen or hidden. He knows all what we do and what we conceal and reveal. No one has the right to claim purity and salvation for themselves and in turn judge and condemn others. Allah knows who is the righteous. Allah clearly says in the Quran, وَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اتَّقَى. Don't claim purity for yourselves. Allah knows who is the righteous. Allah knows who is the righteous, and also no one has the right to force his sexuality on the other. You practice homosexuality, that's your choice, but please stay away from my children and don't force it on me or any member of my congregation. It is a personal choice made by the individual, hence each of us should take responsibility for our own sexuality. Unfortunately to say, we have homosexual people in the Muslim communities. Yes, we do. A member of the congregation came to me and said, my brother comes to this mosque, he's gay. Stop him from coming. I said, it's not my place. This house belongs to Allah. I cannot stop him from coming. And don't tell me who's your brother. I don't want to know. Yeah, you are all welcome, whether you are gay or straight. But I'm sorry, do not try to force or impose your sexuality on anyone else, please. It's a personal choice made by the individual, hence each of us should take responsibility for our own sexuality. It's important to note that sex is only lawful for heterosexual married couples, according to the teaching of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We live in a secular world today. The halal became haram and the haram is halal. Those who follow Allah's moral law regard the marriage as a lifelong union between a man and a woman. The ritual of a marriage ceremony cannot make sex between a homosexual couple lawful in accordance with these teachings. This must be made clear. It doesn't mean because I go to a church and two men would have a marriage recognized by the state, then it will become lawful. No, it doesn't make it lawful. Let me read this again. It is important to note that sex is only lawful for heterosexual married couples, according to the teachings of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Those who follow Allah's moral law regard marriage as a lifelong union between a man and a woman. The ritual of a marriage ceremony cannot make sex between a homosexual couple lawful in accordance with these teachings. Just as simple as that. Please find below the relevant verses in Allah's divine revelation. And I made a list of the verses in Genesis, in Leviticus, in Romans, in Corinthians, in Timothy, and in the Quran. So this is available on our website, on our application. You can go through all the links and you can see the verses in the Old Testament and in the Bible and in the Quran, and you will be prepared or equipped with the right answer to challenge anyone who is trying to claim that's only Muslims who are anti-gay or anti-homosexual. No. Practicing Christians, practicing Jews, and practicing Muslims are all against it because it is all in their books. Very small comment to make regarding our relationship with our enemy, the manifest enemy. Who is our manifest enemy? Ash-Shaytan, Satan. When Satan refused to prostrate himself to Adam on grounds of what? What was the reason? Why Satan refused to prostrate himself to Adam when Allah asked him? What did he say? Ana khayrun, better than him. He was racist. Yes? He was racist. First ever racist remark to be passed by one of Allah's creatures. I am better than him. You created me from fire. You created him from clay. He's nothing. I'm white. You are black. I'm English. You are Asian. I'm an Arab. You are an African. No, no such thing. No racism in Islam. Because we are all brothers and sisters in humanity. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. O mankind, we have created all of you from a single pair of a male and female and made you into nations and tribes to get to know each other, not to despise each other or to look down on each other. So Satan was racist. He refused to apologize. He asked for respite, and when Allah gave him the respite to the day of judgment, he threatened to destroy Adam and all his children. And then since that moment, two parties were created. Hizb al-Shaytan and Hizbullah. The party of Satan and the party of Allah. It's up to you to join this party or that party. And he threatened. And I must read the threat which he made, which he is using now. In Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, we are told in the Quran that Satan causes a lot of confusion to his followers when it comes to deciding one's gender identity or sexual orientation. Satanic threats are mentioned in many verses in the Quran. I give below verses 118 to 120, chapter 4. Upon whom Allah has laid his cares. He said to Allah, I will take to myself an appointed portion of your servants, and I will lead them astray. I shall engross them in vain desires, and I shall command them, and they will cut off the ears of the cattle, and I shall command them, and they will disfigure Allah's creation. Listen very carefully to this threat. And I shall command them, and they will disfigure Allah's creation. وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلَا يُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ. Satan is saying, I'm going to force the children of Adam that they will change the good nature in which you, Allah, created them in. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says at the end of the verse, وَمَنْ يَتَّخِذِ الشَّيْطَانَ وَلِيًّا مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ خَسِرَ خُسْرَانًا مُبِينًا. Whatever, subhanallah, you see, whoever will take Satan as his own friend, as his own wali, as his own supporter, he has indeed suffered a manifest loss. In verse 120, chapter 4, يَعِدُهُمْ وَيُمَنِّيهِمْ وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. Satan makes promises to them and fills them with the vain hopes. But whatever he promises them is merely delusion. And Allah tells us that you can either be a member of his party, the party of Allah, or member of the party of Satan. Now, I don't want to spend too much time, but I'm going to examine with you part of verse 119, chapter 4. You can clearly say that today Satan rules the world with the following 4 Arabic words. وَلَا آمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلَا يُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ. And surely I will command them to alter the creation of Allah, to deface and change the fair nature created by Allah, to disfigure and temper Allah's creation. Satan has the following message on his website. Have you ever tried Satan's website? No, you don't do that. Google Satan's website. I'll read the message anyway. I am Satan, the chief deceiver. Al-Gharur. Allah calls him in the Quran Al-Gharur, the chief deceiver. I am tirelessly recruiting people to join my party. I will command my followers to change the beautiful and perfect way Allah created them in. I will mislead them, and I will create in them false desires. I will become a partner in their wealth and children. وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ وَعِدْهُمْ. That's all from the Quran. What Satan is saying, he's reading the Quran. I will make them lose the pure and innocent souls Allah created them with. I will make them forget about Allah, and they will take me and their own desires as their own God. وَمَن يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ نُقَيِّدُ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. Whoever will walk away from the remembrance of the Most Gracious, we will appoint a Satan unto him who will be his close mate. أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهُ هَوَاهُ. Have you seen the one who has taken his own desire as his own God? A man will become a woman, and a woman will become a man. That's what Satan is saying on his website, okay? I will destroy the family union. A man will marry a man, and a woman will marry a woman. I will ensure the extinction of the human race. Imagine if we are all homosexual, there will be no human race. Gone, finished. They will have tattoos, piercings, and studs all over their bodies. They will change their features and become fake in their looks. I'll go for a nose up, I'll go for a boobs up, I'll do BBL. I'll have the American smile. Nobody's happy with his feature, is there? No, unfortunately. They will change their feature and become fake in their looks. They will become the lowest of the low in their conduct and their disgusting outward appearances. I'm going to tell you a story. I think it is true. A married couple had a child, and the child was so ugly. So ugly. And the man said to the woman, you are so pretty, and I'm good looking. How come this child is so ugly? I'm going to have a DNA because I doubt you. The DNA showed that the child is his child. So he said, tell me the truth. She said, I was so ugly and undergone so many cosmetic surgery. So, yes, you marry a woman who has beautiful eyes and beautiful hair, and when you go on your honeymoon, everything goes back to normal. So, are you the right woman I married? So they will become the lowest of the low in their conduct and their disgusting outward appearances. ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. Allah is saying, we have created man in the best mold, and then he became the lowest of the low because of his deeds. You will not find the majority of them grateful for any of Allah's favors on them. وَلَن تَجِدَ أَكْثَرْهُمْ شَاكِرٍ. This is all from the Quran. Satan said this to Allah. You will not find the majority of the children of Adam grateful or thankful. They will not recognize your bounties and favors on them. They will become corrupt, and they will corrupt others. They will become human Satans ruling on earth. In the hereafter, following the judgment, they will all have to listen to my speech as the president of their party, the party of Satan. So what Satan is going to say? This is in the Quran, chapter 14, Ibrahim. The speech which Satan will give on the day of judgment, after everything been settled. I deceived you. I lied to you. The promise of Allah was true, but you believed me rather than Allah. I had no power to force you. I had but to call you, and you came running after me. So don't blame me. You must blame yourselves. Did you think I was equal with Allah? I know too well that I was not, and never could be. If you did wrong, you must suffer the penalty. Then I will lead my party, the party of Satan, to abide eternally with me in the hellfire. But in this life, I have no power over Allah's sincere servants and righteous devotees who are protected by His grace. They are the party of Allah, Hizbullah, which must excel and prosper in this life and achieve salvation and be the triumphant one in the hereafter. Remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all of us in pairs. وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. Have we not created you in pairs as men and women? verse 8, chapter 78. The creation of all mankind from Adam and Eve. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us. Verse 1, chapter 4, O mankind, fear your Lord who created you from a single soul, and from it created its mate, and from the two spread abroad a multitude of men and women. Fear Allah through whom you demand your rights from one another, and don't sever the ties of kinship. Surely Allah is ever watchful over you. And then Allah tells us in verse 189, chapter 7, it is He who created you from a single soul, and from it made His spouse, that He might find rest in her. And when He covered her, she bore a light burden and walked about it. And in verse 6, chapter 39, He created you from a single soul. Then from that soul He made its mate, and He sent down to you 8 kinds of cattle. And the Quran is full of verses to prove that He created us as men and women. There is no way a man would become a woman or a woman would become a man. This is from Satan. So please, all this information is available on the website, on the application. May Allah bless Bilal, my beautiful son here, Bilal, for all the great work he is doing with his team of the volunteers to upgrade our application and our website. I'm going to retire now, and I leave you in the good hands of my dear brother here, so you will be able to learn more about how should you respond to what the children are being taught at school, and what source of information you should rely on. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Brothers, if you could just, in the car park, there are 2 cars that are blocking, a Mini Countryman YC19 CDE and a Qashqai LS11 KLX. If you could move them, please.
I will auction them in the next 5 minutes. Assalamu alaikum. This is Moses' stick, okay? Okay, sure. Brother Liam asked me, why did you bring your stick today?
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي عمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Jazakum Allah for inviting me to speak about this topic, and inshallah ta'ala, hopefully we'll be covering the first aspects before Maghrib, and then we'll continue after Maghrib inshallah. So what I'll be covering is some issues around schools. What are the rights of parents in schools? What can you withdraw from? What can't you withdraw from? I'll start with a quiz just to test how much you already know, and then try and explain a bit more around that. And then we'll cover more about how we start to tackle these issues as a community, even in our homes, in the discussions we have with our children, and in the way we approach this topic to almost create, and like our dear Sheikh mentioned, that our objectives really is to create strong Muslim families. That is the real challenge that we have today in an era in which the Muslim family, and actually family as a whole, is under attack, where family is considered not that important anymore. And so we've got to focus on building the strength of the Muslim family, within which we raise children who are strong, who will raise more children who are strong within strong Muslim families. So I want to start off with a quiz, and all of the questions are true or false. Yeah. So the first question is, in primary schools, and I'll ask you just to say true or false. In primary schools, sex education classes are statutory, are legally required for schools to teach. So put your hands up if you think that's true. Now put your hands up if you think that's false. It's actually false. The reality is, and I think this is one of the things that I did a presentation in West London in the morning, and it's a similar thing. People believe that this is statutory in schools. Sex education classes are not statutory in primary schools. Primary schools do not have to teach sex education classes. What tends to happen is that schools will teach it, but will probably teach it in year 5 or year 6. Most schools teach it in year 5 or year 6 in a few lessons. Going on to the next question, you can, in primary schools, you can withdraw from sex education classes. Put your hands up if you think that's true. And put your hands up if you think that's false. Good, so most people say true, and that is true. You have the absolute right as parents to withdraw your children from any sex education classes taught within schools, within primary schools. And obviously you've got to find out in your school what is the process by which you withdraw. Usually every school will have to have an SRE or RSE policy. In primary schools, usually called RHE policies, because sex education is not statutory. And that will talk about how do you, as a parent, withdraw your child if you're not happy for them to go into these classes. And usually what will happen is that the head teacher will invite you in for a meeting and say, okay, why do you want to withdraw? Yeah, it's better if you don't, if you don't, your children will not hear the information that they really need. They may hear information from elsewhere. You just say, look, I want to discuss this issue with my children. I want to take care of this responsibility for my own children. I don't think schools should be discussing this. I think I should be doing it. And just stick to your guns, and the school will accept your right to withdraw. Make sure you get written confirmation that the school has withdrawn your child from these classes. Now, in primary schools, next question, in primary schools, relationships education is statutory. Yeah? This subject called relationships education is statutory. Put your hands up if you think that's true. Put your hands up if you think that's false. It's actually true. I'm going to explain a bit about what they're teaching in these classes a little later. But it's really important we understand sex education is not statutory. You can withdraw from that. Relationship education is statutory. You can't withdraw from that. And this is statutory in all schools. So if your children go to an academy, a community school, a maintained school, even if they go to a fee-paying school, an independent school, it's statutory in that school as well. Like a Muslim independent school, they also have to teach these classes. Now they can teach these classes in a different way, but they still have to teach this. Now the next question is, in primary schools, sorry, I should go back to that. In primary schools, LGBTQ plus teaching is statutory in relationship education classes. So in relationship education classes, we said that's statutory. Schools have to teach it. As part of these classes, they have to teach your children about LGBTQ relationships. Is that true or false? Put your hands up if you think that's true. Put your hands up if you think that's false. And it is false. The government said we highly recommend that schools teach it, but it's not a requirement. It's not a requirement that schools teach it. Yeah? So schools are not required to teach about LGBTQ families. And I'll explain where they usually teach that in relationship education classes, but there's no requirement to do so. Now in secondary schools, we're talking about secondary schools now. Relationships and sex education classes are statutory in secondary schools. Put your hand up if you think that's true. Put your hand up if you think that's false. And it is true. In secondary schools, relationships and sex education classes are statutory. All schools have to teach these subjects. And I'll explain a bit more about what they teach much later. But in secondary schools, a parent can withdraw their child from the sex education element of RSE. Is that true or false? Put your hand up if you think that's true. You have the right to withdraw from the sex education of RSE. Put your hand up if you think that's false. And it's true. You still have the right to withdraw your child from the sex education element of RSE. That is being taught in a secondary school to your children. Yeah? So you have the right to request withdrawal from the sex education elements of the RSE classes. And because RSE is broken down into two subjects, one is relationship education and one is sex education in a secondary school. So you can withdraw from the sex education element of RSE. The next question, in secondary schools, a parent can withdraw their child from the sex education element of RSE classes until the age of 15. Put your hands up if you think that's true. Put your hands up if you think that's false. It's true. So until the age of 15, your child can be withdrawn from the sex education element of RSE. Now after that, your child will be brought in to the teacher, and they will say, look, before this, you were withdrawn to your child. They say, well, you were withdrawn. Now you decide, do you want to opt into these classes, or do you want to remain withdrawn? So now the decision is in the hands of your child and no longer in your hands. So that's a change that happens at the age of 15 in a secondary school. Now, schools are legally required to consult parents. We're talking about primary schools and secondary schools. Schools are legally required to consult parents to get their views and to make changes based upon those views. Are schools legally obliged to consult parents? Put your hands up if you think that's true. Put your hands up if you think that's false. It's true, before a school starts to teach RSE classes, either in relational education classes in a primary school or a secondary school, there's a legal obligation to consult. Now that consultation is mainly around the policy. So the policy, the RSE policy which is written in a school, explains how the school organizes RSE classes. So it says what they teach, how they teach it, when they teach it, what resources they use, how you can withdraw, how they consult parents. Now lots of RSE policies that I've seen don't explain anything. They're very meaningless. They don't really have much detail. They don't have enough detail. But they're meant to have more detail than they actually have. And we need to start making the case for schools being more transparent, being more upfront with parents about what they're teaching and how they're teaching it. So before a school finalizes the RSE policy, they have to consult parents on its contents. Yeah, and so at that stage, you should go to the school and say, look, I don't think this is appropriate. I don't think this is right. I don't think this is how you should organize this subject. If you have any concerns about how they're teaching the subject, you can raise it. Now you don't have to wait until the school revises the RSE policy, because the schools usually revise the policy every 2 to 3 years. So if it had the first policy written in 2021, it might be revising it this year or next year. But that doesn't mean you have to wait until that happens to raise concerns or to ask questions or to say, I don't like the way you're teaching this particular part of the resource to year 2 children or whatever. But it's important to continue to ask schools and to feed back to schools about things that you like and don't like about the way they're teaching RSE to your children. Now, consultation means a school should show parents the resources it plans to use, but not listen to their views. Is that the definition of consultation? If you think that's true, put your hands up. If you think that's false, put your hands up. And it's false. The reality is consultation means more than that. Consultation means that they have to ask for your views. Now they're not going to take every single parent's views into account, but they have to ask for your views. And when they hear the parents' views, they should start to make changes based upon what parents are saying. Most schools will say to you, parents, come into the assembly hall. Now we're going to show you some of the resources, and that's it. That's not consultation. We need to get schools to consult parents in a meaningful way around the policy, and also get our views about the resources. The 2 areas that you can change are parts of the resources and when they're teaching the different topics. Now this is the next, I'll give you a clue to the next answer. The government has set the resources a school has to use and the year groups that a school must teach the statutory topics, the topic areas in relationships education or relationships and sex education. Is it the government that sets this? Put your hands up if you think that's true. Put your hands up if you think that's false. And it's actually false. The government doesn't say to any school, you have to teach this resource. And the government doesn't say to any school, you have to teach this in year 1 or year 5 or year 7 or year 9, year 10 or year 11. Rather, the school makes that decision. The school chooses. So sometimes you go to a school and say, I don't like this resource. They'll say, no, it's statutory. They'll say, it's statutory, you have to teach it. You say, no, what is statutory? Okay, what the government set out are the topics you have to teach. That's statutory, but this resource isn't statutory. Or you say to parents, to a school, I don't want you to teach my children about the names of sexual body parts in year 2, which lots of schools are doing. Teaching the names of sexual body parts in year 2, to 6-year-old children. And then you say, I don't think you should teach it to year 2 children. And then they say, look, this is statutory. What is statutory? What is statutory is that by the end of primary school, children learn about things which keep them safe. What is appropriate and inappropriate touch. It's not statutory to teach this in any year group. When a school decides to teach it in year 2, that's the choice of the school. And they have to take responsibility for that and answer to why they're teaching that in that year group. The greatest power parents have to make changes to RSE in schools is the law. Put your hands up if you think that's true. Put your hands up if you think that's false. It's actually false. I don't believe, the law, the reality is, if you're unhappy with what a school is teaching your child and you want to take the school to court, it's very expensive and very slow. And a lot of the times when parents have raised concerns and tried to take legal action, the courts have not been very sympathetic to parents, have not been very, they're not sided on the side of the parents. They're more likely to side on the behalf of the schools. That's not what our greatest role is. But our greatest role as parents, actually our greatest power as parents in schools is parent power. When parents come together and raise a concern that is clear to the school, what we want you to change. And if that change is in line with what they're able to change, and then there's parents behind that, there's 50 or 60 parents behind that, that is what makes change in schools. That is what enables parents to raise concerns and schools to listen to those concerns. So the law is not really our power, but our power is parent power. The problem we have at the moment is that far too many parents are not willing to stand up for what is right. Yeah, they're not willing to stand up for their children. And I speak to parents in schools. There's one or two parents who are doing lots of work and trying to make changes on behalf of all the parents. We spoke to the parents and they say, no, we're not really concerned about that. The mother wears niqab, the father wears a thobe, big beard. And we say, are you concerned that your children are learning this in school, are learning about LGBTQ, are learning about sexual relationships, are learning about sexual body parts, are learning things which are going to shape your children's minds? And he says, oh, they're going to have to learn it anyway. Look, so look, what is this? How is this acceptable for a Muslim who has a primary responsibility to raise his children in order that his children not succeed in the dunya only, but actually succeed mainly in the akhirah, which is about saving our children so that they enter Jannah alongside us? If that is our main role as parents, which it should be, then why is it that we're not concerned sometimes about these issues? Yeah, the reality is, look here, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of brothers and probably a lot of sisters here. But is this the number of parents there are in this local area? No, there are many more parents. And sometimes parents prioritize different things over their children. And that's a problem I'm going to speak about a little later. We've got to concentrate on 4 areas. You need to be aware of 4 areas that are problematic for your children. There's other things in schools like assemblies and things, but these are the 4 fixed subject areas that you need to be concerned about. One is relationships education, which we're going to talk about in a minute. The other is health education, which is part of the subject. Relationship and health education is one. It was made statutory in 2017, but it actually, in effect, it was implemented in 2020 or 2021. That's the latest change in schools. Then there's science and there's sex education. Now, for example, in relationship education class, by the end of primary school, children need to learn that sometimes families look different from their family, but that they should respect those differences and know that other children's families are also characterized by love and care. This is where they'll teach about some children have 2 mums and some children have 2 dads. Now, most schools, you can't stop a school from necessarily talking about this, even though it's not a requirement. They'll say, look, the government has recommended this, so we're doing it. What we need to make sure that schools do is that they don't speak about family types in a way that goes beyond the facts. Some people live like this. Some people live like this. Okay, that can be acceptable. But when schools start to say, wouldn't you like to live like this? Wouldn't you like 2 dads or 2 mums? That's where we definitely need to challenge that, because this is inappropriate. And what we're finding is that lots of teachers are going beyond their professional role as teachers and starting to impose their values upon children. And I'll speak about this a little later. But be very careful about this and find out when they're teaching this. Sometimes they'll say we have to teach this in year 2. Why do you have to teach it in year 2? Can't you teach that in year 3 or year 4, or year 5 or year 6? What's the urgency to teach that in year 2? Why should children be exposed to these types of lifestyles at such a young age? Why can't we let children remain children for longer? Why do we have to impose adult views about sexual ideology and gender identity on children at such a young age? It just doesn't make any sense at all. So we've got to approach schools and say, why have you decided to teach this in that group, in that year group? A lot of the times, schools are teaching it then because they bring in like a resource. They're buying a resource from a company and they say you should teach this in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. And that's not acceptable. The government has given flexibility to schools, and schools are not taking into account that flexibility. Now, there's a resource called Jigsaw. Has anybody heard of the resource called Jigsaw? Jigsaw PSHE. It's one of the most widely used resources. Yeah? It's one of the top 5 resources in the country. I see lots of schools, and whenever I hear, what are you teaching? Jigsaw. Yeah? Jigsaw is being used very, very broadly across lots of schools. Now, there's a requirement in the curriculum that says by the end of primary school, children should know what a stereotype is and how stereotypes can be unfair, negative, or destructive. And I think most schools will focus on what they call gender stereotypes. They will say, for example, that some boys don't like blue, some girls don't like pink, some girls don't like dresses, and some boys don't like football. And so we shouldn't enforce our own stereotypes of what a boy and a girl is. And then the Jigsaw resource, they start off with talking about unfair stereotypes. And then they start to talk about transgenderism. Yeah? And this is in a primary school. They start to talk about 2 men who became women. Yeah? And the problem is that the relationship education curriculum does not require for children to learn about transgenderism in primary school. It's not a requirement at all. So why is that included there? So if your children are going to a school which is using the Jigsaw resource, find out, are you teaching this module about gender stereotypes? Yeah, and when do you teach it and how do you teach it? And you can actually get the school not to teach that whole module because that's not appropriate for children at that age. And that isn't even part of the relationship education curriculum. They've added it on for whatever reason. I don't know what reason it is apart from corrupting children. There's no other reason that they would include something like that. So it's very important that we challenge these things when they're taught. Yeah. So this is the Jigsaw example. It's called Celebrating Difference. It says, understand everyone has a right to be who they are. And this is fundamentally also the problem. Fundamentally the problem is that what does it mean people can be whoever they are? That doesn't mean anything. That comes from a Disney film or a Disney cartoon. What does it mean? People can be whoever they want to be. The reality is everybody is affected by societal influences around them which shape who they become. Yeah? And it's not as if people just decide, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that. No. The reality is the pull of society and its influences, whether it be the entertainment industry, the music industry, whether it be your children's friends, whether it be what's taught in schools, what they see on TV, all of these have a collective impact on children. So sometimes they argue that, oh, let children be who they want to be. What do you mean? What do you mean be what they want to be? The reality is everybody is trying to shape children in a particular way, and we want to shape our children according to Islam. Absolutely. Why is that a problem? Why is it that when you want to shape children to be something that out of your liberal playbook, your idea that this world is about just fulfilling your desires, that you inflict this upon children? But when we want to teach our children about an Islamic framework, that's you imposing your values upon your children. It's quite comical. So this is the Jigsaw thing. It talks about 2 stories, Laverne and Caitlin. One of them is called Laverne Cox, and one of them is the other one called Caitlin Jenner. They were men who became women, and he starts talking about their example. Now, this should be removed. You say to a school, if they're using Jigsaw resource, don't include this aspect because it's not appropriate and it's not even part of the relationship education curriculum. Another requirement is, and this is being taught in all schools, is that pupils should know by the end of primary school that each person's body belongs to them and the differences between appropriate and inappropriate or unsafe physical and other contact. So they should learn about things which keep them safe. It's about child abuse. What will keep children safe from abuse? Now, schools have interpreted this to mean that children in year 1 or year 2 have to learn the names of the sexual body parts. And we say that's not appropriate. Firstly, you can teach children to be safe from abuse in a way where you don't have to talk about the names of the body parts. There were resources that existed called, for example, the PANTS rule from NSPCC, National Society for the Protection of Cruelty to Children. And they came up with a resource which said, if you teach your children that what is below the pants are private and nobody should see that, that's fine. Children should know that, but they don't need to know the names of the body parts. And I was speaking to a group of parents this morning and say, look, they argue, if you look at some of these policies, they say, look, children need to know about the names of the body parts because, firstly, if there's a court case, they need to know the names of the body parts so that the court case manages to succeed, which is rubbish, yeah, because the children are not expected to know the names of every body part in order to know. They just point to the area that was touched, that's enough. And they said children need to know the names of the body parts in order that when they go to a doctor, that they can explain their symptoms correctly. Now, that's ludicrous. Imagine a 5-year-old child. How much do you expect them to know about the different parts of the body? You say, oh, I've got, it hurts. Where does it hurt? Oh, there. Yeah. Or you're not expected to know larynx or something like that. It's not expected for them to know that. They point to a part of their body, and sometimes it is very unclear as to whether they're pointing to the right place. Now, you can't get much out of a child like that. So why are we using? And the problem is that there's lots of organizations that came about that want to tell children, look, your body belongs to you. And that may sound, oh, that sounds really good. Yeah, your body belongs to you. But the reality is that when it comes to it, when the children grow up and they say your body belongs to you, that means that you can do whatever you like with your body. And we said, no, our bodies do not belong to us. Our bodies are amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we treat our amana in a way which is in keeping with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands. So there's a different worldview at play here. But I think it's very important that we challenge this in school and say, why are you teaching children about the names of sexual body parts in year 1? This is completely inappropriate. And get the school to justify that. And if they say about court cases, give me a court case. I remember I spoke to lots of local authority people, and they said, look, lots of court cases have failed because children haven't been able to name their body parts. I said, give me that case. Give me the case law. Give me the names of those cases. And I never heard back from them. Because it's made up. It doesn't exist. It's just another lie to justify this particular approach to young children. In science as well, in science, they will be teaching about life process of reproduction in some plants and animals. Sometimes some schools will try and teach human reproduction in science in primary school. And we need to push back against that. It's not a requirement in primary school to teach about human reproduction in a primary school as part of the National Curriculum Science Order. Yeah, it's not a requirement. Yeah, so we need to push back against that. And also they talk about in health education. They talk about the changing adolescent body, puberty, and menstruation. Obviously, children need to know about puberty and menstruation from the perspective of a Muslim. Going through this is a sign of them moving away from childhood to adulthood. Yeah, so it's really important children know that from an Islamic perspective. But the thing is, the way they teach it in the primary school is obviously devoid of all of that. And sometimes they'll teach it in a mixed class, which we should say that children should be separated, boys and girls separated. A male teacher for the boys, a female teacher for the girls, and that they should be taught in a way which just goes through the scientific facts and doesn't go beyond that. But the point is that we need to be asking questions to schools and challenging things when they're not appropriate. And in non-statutory sex education classes, we said you can withdraw from that in primary school. There is no curriculum in a primary school for that. And so you can just withdraw from that. Okay, so the most effective actions we can do, first is understand what you can change. So understand there's some things you can change in schools, other things you can't change. You can't say to a school, I don't want relationship education to be taught to my children. But you can say to a school, I don't like this resource. I don't think it's appropriate for my children. Yeah. You can also say, for example, I don't like I don't think you should teach this to year 2 children. I think it's inappropriate, and you get parents to come behind you for that. That's something you can change. Try and change what is most dangerous. What is most dangerous is exposing to children explicit resources and exposing children to LGBTQ ideology at an early age. These are things that are really important for us to prioritize. There may be 50 things that we're not happy with, but focus on the things which will have the greatest impact on your child and all other children. Ask lots of questions. Yeah. For example, one of the things that we should ask schools is, how have you taken into account the religious background of my children when you're teaching this subject? And schools will say, why is that even a question to answer? That's because the guidance that the government wrote says that schools, before they are deciding on the resources and choosing the resources and planning the curriculum, they have to take into account the religious background of our children. Sometimes in schools, there's like 60%, 70%, 80, sometimes 80, 90% Muslim children, and the schools have got no idea about what Muslims believe or not believe. Yeah, and that's unacceptable. Why is it that you are teaching children and you've got no idea of what is acceptable culturally in their perspective or not? And the government said schools have to be sensitive to the way they teach these subjects. So that means that schools can teach it differently in one area from another. Schools have to teach it have to also engage with faith communities. But how many times do schools come to Masajid and say, look, we're teaching this subject, give us some advice about that? Yeah. So reality is there's a lot of things that schools are obliged to do they're not doing. And so we've got to ask questions. How are you taking into account religious background of our pupils? Have you approached other Muslim organizations or Masajid to get some advice on how to teach it? What resources are you using? Yeah, and it's really important that we ask to see the resources. In the past, when parents have gone to ask to see the resources, schools have said, no, we can't show you the resources. The government wrote to all schools back in May and said, you can't prevent parents from looking at the resources when they request them. You can't use your confidentiality agreements with these companies that you bought them off in order to prevent you from showing them to parents. So you have to show that to parents. Really don't take no for an answer when you go to a school and ask to see all the resources, make sure they show them to you. Work with other parents as well. Working with other parents is really important. Yeah? That's the way we're going to get changes in schools. And then make dua and know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. Make sure that obviously we recognize that we can't achieve anything without the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So make sure that we make regular dua for our children's guidance and make dua for us to be able to make effective changes in schools and to reach the hearts of the people that we're trying to change as well. Now I want to talk about some issues around the wider influences. Yeah? And I'll start talking about that and we'll break for Maghrib and we'll continue after Maghrib. You know, our children live in a society where schools are one of the influences that are affecting our children, but one of many influences. Our children are affected by what is in social media, if they go into social media, smartphones, children's friends, what they see on TV or in films or in cartoons, what they read in books. All of these things are around our children. And firstly, we've just got to take a moment and reflect on that. That the influences around our children and even around us. Well, it's not even just our children, it's us as well. Society around us is shaping us, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in not so good ways. Yeah? And we've got to recognize the influence of society around us. The first step in being able to identify those influences is first recognizing that we're all influenced in some way or another. And so we've got to recognize what are the good and the bad influences around us. Now, over the last couple of years, I've been receiving lots of calls from parents saying, look, my son identifies as gay. My daughter wants to be a boy. My daughter no longer believes in Allah. You know, there's an issue, there's a problem here. Yeah? And sometimes we're not dealing with the problem until the crisis hits our homes. Yeah? And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really protect our families in this age of danger, of lots of fitan upon our families. But I think really we've got to be more proactive than that. And so obviously when a family is in distress and a father or a mother is calling and saying, look, we need help, obviously they need help. But the reality is that there's lots we can do to be proactive in ensuring our children are not affected by these ideas and values. And that's what I'm going to cover today. Yeah? And we're not going to talk about apathy because we're not apathetic. Apathy is when you look at the problem and say, what can I do? Or what do I do? Or there's nothing I can do. But actually we know there's a lot we can do. Yeah? So let's look at proactive response. In our children, we've got to build foundational strength in our children. We've got to build emotional security. We've got to disrupt the normalization process in our children. And we've got to connect our children to the Islamic behavioral strategies which underline the difference between identity and behavior. So talking about foundational strength. Yeah? When most children are asked, why are you Muslim? What's the most common answer that the children give? Sorry? My parents are Muslim. Yeah, and that's not good. Yeah, I speak to Muslim children all the time, and usually I ask them, why are you Muslim? And all of them say, most of them, probably 9 out of 10 say, because my parents are Muslim. I was born in a Muslim family. That's it. And that is problematic. Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, because when we're saying to our children, yeah, when our children start to say, look, why can't I have boyfriend or girlfriends? What is wrong in having sexual relations before marriage? Why is Islam too strict? What's wrong with being gay? Yeah, why can't I be who I am? Why shouldn't someone be allowed to live however they want? When they ask that, they are not connected to the reason why they were created. Yeah. Now, the answer to these individual questions isn't the answer that we expect to give. Like, we don't say, oh, we can't have girlfriend because no, that's not what Muslims do. No, but that doesn't mean anything to the child. Yeah? Our children have to have a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which reminds them that He created us for a purpose and that we're going to meet Him and account for our deeds. And Allah will reward and punish us dependent upon how we lived life on this earth. And that while we live life on this earth, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who can define for us what is good and bad, what is evil and what is good, what is right and what is wrong. And human beings are completely incapable of defining for themselves what is good and bad, because we are biased and we just want to fulfill our desires. And if we were to choose between two things, our desires would push us towards the thing which fulfills our desires, rather than that which repels our desires, that restricts us from accessing those desires that we want to achieve. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran doesn't say to human beings, and we need to build this as a strong foundation in our children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say in the Quran, you are Muslim because your parents are Muslim. Yeah? If the reality was that somebody is from a particular belief system because their family is from a particular belief system, then Ibrahim as-salam would have believed in the idols like his uncle did. Yeah? Or the people in his village did. The people who were worshipping the idols did. But he didn't do that. He went against that because he realized that was wrong. Yeah? The reality is we're not Muslim because our parents are Muslim. That may have been a starting point. And it's a blessing that we've been brought up in a Muslim family. That's a blessing that we need to be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for. But that is not the reason. The reason is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says to us, as all of us as human beings who can think about the reality around us, were they created by nothing? Were they the creators? Like, simple question, like, the reality is that we live in societies where people don't ask questions about why they were created and who created them. Because, a child is born and there's a huge entertainment industry which distracts people again and again and again and again from the realities of life, so that they don't have to think about those things. Yeah, they go from one pleasure to another pleasure to another pleasure to another pleasure. You binge watch another Netflix series, and then there's more things to take over our time. And so people can't think, okay, why was I created? And when you ask somebody, what do you think? Who do you think created you? That's not really that important. That's not I'm not into religion. I'm not into religion. And the vast majority of people in this country no longer subscribe to a religious belief anymore. Yeah, the vast majority in this country. So if you say to somebody, the Bible says this, say, I don't care about the Bible. But what is the Bible? It means nothing to them. Nothing at all. The reality is we live, England is, the UK is one of the most secular countries in Europe. And even more so than in America. America, there's still a lot more adherence to religion. Whatever you say about America, here it's very different. But the reality is that our children are growing up into that in that environment. But the reality is that the Quran asks questions to human beings about our existence and says, "Inna fi khalqis samawati wal ard wa ikhtilafil layli wan nahar la ayat li ulil albab." In the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of night and day, these are signs for people of understanding, the ulul albab. Now that's the reality is that just by recognizing that there's certain things, certain patterns that exist within the universe. Every day we wake up in the morning and the sun rises. Every day we go to sleep and the sun sets. And this follows that same course and same set of rules every day and night. Yeah. And it's not there's no such a thing that we wake up in the morning and the sun hasn't risen and we wonder what has happened, or the sun hasn't set when it comes to Maghrib time. This design or this course of creation follows a particular path. And then you say, look, if there's a design, if there's rules, there's a rule maker and a designer. If there's something that's created, there's a creator. I remember during the summer holidays, there was a summer class in 2 masajid in my local area, and the masjid said, look, we want Muslim children to understand some of the things that you're talking about. I said, what are their ages? They said, the first group, they're aged between 6 and 9. I said, wow, it's really a young age. Yeah. What do we discuss with them? So all we did was a simple activity. I brought a bag of different objects, an empty bottle of water, a spoon, a cup, some fruit, some paper, a tissue, all sorts of different things. And I got them to come up in turn, one after the other, and pick one object out of the bag. Maybe they picked a spoon. I said, where does a spoon come from? What is the main material that a spoon is made out of? Oh, they say metal. Okay, what type of metal? Oh, stainless steel. Now, how is steel made? Where does it come from? What is the original source of the material that makes these metals? Or it comes from the ground. Okay, who put that in the ground? You eventually come. It's like a causation link. You go back and back and back and back, and eventually you're going to have to say, who created that? Who created the first seed that for the first apple upon this earth? Now it has to come from somewhere. Now you can say that all of the magnificence of creation came about just by chance, but that's not a suitable answer to a complex question. You can't say you go to for example, you go to a park and you have 10 different types of trees that have 10 different types of leaves, and you think all of these have been planted in the same soil. They're different seeds. Now, how can it be that those different seeds have sprouted and grown into these huge trees that give off different colored leaves, different shaped leaves? The reality is that we see the complexity of creation and we realize this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And remember, the reason why we're talking about this is because we need to connect our children to a certainty about their creation, about they were created. Yeah? Just like the phone I'm holding in my hand exists, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. And He definitely created me. And He created me for a purpose. But the starting point is He created me. And if our children have that starting point, that foundation, for example, a bread comes from a factory, we buy it from a shop, it comes from wheat, the wheat comes from a seed. Now, who created that first seed? And people say there's a question mark there, but we know it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? And so it's connecting our children to man-made and natural objects, and then bringing that discussion back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything. I'm not going to go through this in any great detail, but just say, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have they not considered how camels have been created? And some people say, look, why are camels that important? Yeah, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bother to talk about camels in the Quran? But when you study camels, you see how complex creations they are. Yeah, where do camels live? In the desert. And what do you have a lot of in the desert? Sand. What happens when there's a huge gust of wind in the desert? Sandstorms. Now, when sandstorms blow the sand around, yeah, it's likely to get up the nostrils of camels, and it can literally kill them because it can block their airways and they can't breathe. But camels have this unique capability of blocking their airways, yeah, their nose, their nostrils, yeah, at will, just so that they almost act as a layer to protect themselves from sand entering into the nose. Yeah. Camels can drink 130 liters of water in less than 10 minutes, under 10 minutes. And that water is enough for them to survive for 2 to 3 weeks. Just by looking at creation, you come back to the fact that Allah created us. Yeah? And it's impossible for creation to exist without a creator. Yeah? Just like whenever we say, whenever we look at anything that's designed, a phone or a microphone or a laptop. We say, oh, who designed that? Oh, Apple designed, it's Apple Mac. Yeah? And we come back to the designer. Yeah? And a designer has a manual to say how to use it in the proper way. This follows in life as it follows in everything. Yeah? The reality is, everything that is designed has a designer, has a creator. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything. How many leaves can you see here? Someone said 0. Why is it 0? They're all insects. That's right. These are insects. These insects live in parts of forests, yeah, or where there's lots of greenery, where they can camouflage themselves so that they can protect themselves from predators. When a predator comes past, it sees the leaf and says, the leaf is not appetizing, but it's actually an insect. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created them in that way. It's amazing, you know. So if you were to put the blood vessels of the human body down on the ground from end to end, yeah, how many miles would it measure from end to end? Yes. Yes. How many times?
52.
Oh, good, mashallah. 60,000 miles in origins, but yeah, you're right. 60,000 miles. We have in our human body 60,000 miles of blood vessels in our body. And people look at that. You know, there's some people who, somebody studying, like my children were studying biology for GCSEs, and just by looking at the complexity of the human body, yeah, you look at that, you think, subhanallah, wow, amazing. Every part of the body, all of the organs of the body work together in a way which enables us to do the most simplest actions that sometimes we take for granted: breathing, digesting food, yeah. All of these things, all of these natural processes in the body that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in us are signs for us to connect those things with the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fact that Allah created us. Yeah? Look, and I love looking at like these fish. Yeah, these fish, sometimes they look like they're CGI, computer generated images. Yeah, because they look so beautiful. And they think, look, you look under the ocean, there's tens of thousands of different types of creation under the ocean. Yeah, and it's amazing, the whole system of creation. Now, once we know that the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the next question is how do we know how to live our lives? Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala communicated through the prophets, through lots of prophets throughout the whole of, from the start of the time till now, communicated through prophets to the people, through the angel Jibreel alayhi salam, and the final message that was sent to mankind was the Quran. Now, what is the greatest miracle that the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given? Sorry? The Quran, absolutely. The Quran is the greatest miracle that was given. Why? Why is the Quran a miracle? What is miraculous about the Quran? Okay, it's pure truth, but it's something more than that as well. What society? Quran came to which society?
It can't be changed.
It can't be changed, but even before that, Quran came to what society in Mecca? Yes, the poets. It came to a society where the Arabic language was, in essence, almost like there was competitions in terms of who could write the best poetry. The best poetry was placed in the Kaaba, and people would compete to get their poetry in the Kaaba. Yeah. Now, when the Quran came, it said that this Quran is a language that if you were to objectively read it and understand it, you would know this is not from human beings. Yeah, this Quran is of a particular language type that no human being has the capacity to create this Quran, to write the Quran as it is. Yeah, so it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you were to bring together everybody, the jinns, the man, anybody at your disposals, and come together to try and bring the like of this Quran, you will never be able to do so. Yeah, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set a particular challenge to produce the like of it, produce 10 surahs like it. If you think this is from other than Allah, produce 10 surahs like it. And the people couldn't do that, so Allah said, just produce one surah like it. What is the shortest surah of the Quran? Kawthar. 3 short verses. So the Arabs are told, okay, you think that this is not from Allah? Then bring 3 short verses, yeah? One surah, the length of Surah Kawthar, and you disprove the Quran is from Allah, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. And even the leaders of the Quraysh who disliked the message of Islam would come and listen to the Quran and say, wow, this is beautiful. And they'll bump into each other. What are you doing here? I'm just here just to hear. And they rebuke each other. Why are you here? You shouldn't be here. But they're both there because they want to hear the beautiful message of the Quran. The reality is the Quran is of the highest caliber of the Arabic language that nobody can produce the like of it. It's miraculous in and of itself. So this is the first real proof of the Quran. There's many other proofs of the Quran. Yeah, there's many other additional proofs of the Quran. The Quran speaks about things that are happening in the future that hadn't happened. Yeah, Ghulibatul Rum. The Romans have been defeated. Yeah, and there's other examples of this. Okay. So 5 more minutes. I'll just. The reality is the Quran. We got to teach our children. Look, when you hold the Quran in your hands, you're not holding any book. It's not a storybook like anything else that you hold. This is the word of Allah from the heavens that was sent through the angel Jibreel alayhi salam to the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam to guide mankind. Yeah. And so when our children connect with it, they're not connecting with just, I'm just reading a set of Arabic words that I've got no connection to. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? I was hearing this, now this is not evidence, but I heard this story and I thought it was beautiful. A masjid in London, yeah? There was a young boy, 12-year-old boy. He came into the masjid with his mother. And the mother said to the imam, look, my son, he wants to be Muslim. We're from a Catholic family. We don't really like it, but he wants to really become Muslim. Yeah, and he wants to take his shahada. Yeah, this boy, he said he never met a Muslim before. Really, he went to a Catholic school. He never really was given da'wah by any Muslim. And he said, look, 1 year ago I had a dream, and that dream it said to me that in that dream it said you have to be a Muslim. Yeah. And because of that, I started to learn about Islam. I went on the internet, I started to research Islam, I started to watch lectures and learn how to pray. And his mum said one day in Ramadan, even before he took his Shahada, he fasted the entire month of Ramadan. Yeah? And he said, look, once I was passing his room in the morning, it was about 7 o'clock, and he was crying. So I went into the room and said, why are you crying? And he said, look, I missed Fajr, and I'm really unhappy. And subhanallah, the reality is that people are coming to Islam in numbers. Now, the numbers are not the evidence for the truth of Islam. Yeah? Numbers are never the evidence of the truth of Islam, or individuals accepting Islam is never a truth. The truth is in and of itself of the Quran. The Quran and the message of Allah, that is the truth of Islam. But the reality is that people are coming to Islam in numbers because they see something that sometimes we don't see ourselves and we take for granted ourselves. The reality is for our children, it's essential that they approach Islam not from the perspective that my parents are Muslim, but from the perspective that Allah created me. Definitely created me. He created me for a purpose which is contained in the Quran, which is to worship Him, and that's the height of that's the height of an action that a human being can do, is to worship Allah. That is the purpose, the reason why we were created. Yeah? And that was the reason why Allah created us on this earth. We'll go back to Allah. This life will be short, and we'll enter Jannah, inshallah, if we worked hard in this life and through the mercy of Allah, and then we will live an eternal existence through the mercy of Allah as well. So inshallah, we'll end now, and we'll carry on our next section. So this is a good point to stop. So I think you make your wudu and preparations for Maghrib, and inshallah we'll start here.
We'll continue after Maghrib.
Yes, and we'll continue again after Maghrib. There's a few things that are important. So this is the first element, bringing strong foundations. And the next one is building emotional security in your children. And then we're going to talk about how do we tackle LGBTQ. But this is part of that wider discussion of building strong Muslims within strong Muslim families. Jazakumullah. How do babies cry?
Because I think because they're scared of the stuff that's happening.
Okay, so they want to be picked up. Yeah, that's right. So they're scared or they're frightened. They want to be picked up. That's one good reason why babies cry. What other reasons? Yes.
No,
Yes.
And they would cry, but then they would get up.
Yes. So the nappy is full and they cry. So they might say, change my nappy. So they either cry because they want to be picked up, because they want to be comforted, or they want their nappy is full, or they're tired, they want to sleep. Yeah. There's always a reason why a baby is crying. Yeah. Now these babies would cry and cry and cry because nobody would pick them up. They would stop crying. Think, what's the point in me crying now? So the child would say, not cry. And babies, even when they were fed, their bottle would be placed in their mouth and leaned against the side of the cot. And when the baby had finished drinking, the bottle would stay there for a very long time in the child's mouth. So the child was not being picked up, was not given any eye contact, was not being held. The child wasn't being loved. And all these children grew up with lots of developmental problems. A lot of these children would bang their head with their fists, would bang their heads against the wall. When they grow up, they had so many problems throughout their life. And then Western academics started to say that children develop attachment to their parents, and love is a primary need of every child. And a child who doesn't get that love will grow up with developmental problems. Yeah. Everybody, including children, understands love visibly. Yeah. So you can't just say, "Oh, my child knows I love them." Yeah. Unless you show them that love, they will never know that you love them. Yeah. And so it's visible ways, in ways in which they don't have to interpret. Does my father love me or not? And so we're going to talk about the 5 languages of love next. Yeah. And your way of showing love to your children may be different from the way your children understand love. Yeah. But it's all the visible ways of, and we're going to talk about that in the next slide. And your influence with your children is based upon a relationship with them. If you don't have a relationship with your children, you're never going to be able to influence them. And the basis of any strong relationship with a child is based on love. A child knowing that they're loved. Yeah. And the love of the father is most missing from homes. Children are growing up in homes with parents, but the father just being absent from the home, either absent physically or absent emotionally. And this is causing a huge amount of problems in homes. So these are the 5 ways in which we can show love to our children. One is physical touch. You show them love by hugging them, by cuddling them, by kissing them, and pats on the back. So just physical touch is a very important way of showing love to the children in a direct way. When you hug your child or kiss your child, and this is not just like babies or 3-year-olds or 5-year-olds, it's even children as they go into their teenage years, 13, 14, they still need the love, especially of the father. Yeah. So hugging them, if they don't want to be hugged, just pat on the back. Yeah. Or just some close touching or close connection to them. Yeah. Now, there was an example of when the Prophet was once with a tribal chief by the name of Al-Aqra. Al-Aqra ibn Habis al-Tamimi. So he was sitting opposite Al-Aqra, and he had just hugged and kissed his grandson, Hassan radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And now the man, Al-Aqra, saw that he had just kissed his grandson. And he said, "Look, I've got 10 children and I never kissed any of them. I've got 10 children and I never kissed any of them." The Prophet said, "Man la yarham la yurham." Whoever of you does not show mercy will not be shown mercy. Yeah? As in, you think that you're a man, that you don't kiss your children like I kiss mine. But this is the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. This is the way in which we are expected to treat our children. Yeah? And the problem is that culturally in our community sometimes, the father isn't the one who gives the emotional love to the children. The father, when we were growing up, what was the main role of our fathers in the household? Yes, the breadwinner. And the brother said cash machine, but yes, breadwinner. The one who goes out to work. And so the father would think, look, I go out work, I work long hours, very hard work, I come back, I put food on the table, I pay for the bills, the roof over the head, clothes on your back. This is how I show my love for you. But this is not how children understand love. Children think that the father, that's what the father does. So fathers need to show love in a more physical way. Yeah, I remember when we were growing up, I used to hug my father 2 times every single year. Only 2 times. When was those 2 times? The Eid, absolutely. And that was a hug which is it was quite uncomfortable, because we never hugged our father, but when it came to Eid, we would hug our fathers. Children are in need of love, especially from their fathers. The second way is affirming words, saying I love you, saying words which say well done, praising them, encouraging them, keep going, you're doing very well. I know you struggled with that, but you did really well. I'm really proud of you. Saying words which show that you are proud of them, you appreciate them, you value them, you're grateful for the things that they do, the effort they do. Now here, the focus should be on the effort and not the result. So don't say if they've achieved something, well done for doing that. It should be well done for the effort you did in achieving that. Why should we focus on the effort and not the result? Yes.
Because when you try even more and more, it feels good. But when you get the results, it will be very good. But you put more effort to it.
Excellent. Yes. Brilliant. You should come and just deliver this. Yeah? I should be there. You should be here. Yeah. The reality is that's true. Effort can be improved. Effort can be better and better. The result is one and it's gone. It's finished. But effort can always be improved. So when you focus on the effort, it can always be improved. There's one other reason why you should focus on the effort and not the results. Where do the results come from? Allah. From Allah. So why should you focus in praising the result? You should focus on the effort. Yeah, because a child memorizes a page of the Quran in 5 minutes. That is because he's got good memories from Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him the capacity to memorize better than other children. So focus on the effort which is in our control, in our hands, which we can improve, not in the effort, not in the results. Also, when we praise our daughters, we should focus more on the actual things that they've achieved rather than the way the physical looks. That's because in this society still girls and women are still valued for the way they look rather than anything else. And so we should focus more on well done for looking after your brothers and sisters, well done for passing that exam, well done for whatever, something of substance rather than something that is just well done for you looking beautiful, because that just reinforces that society sees women as just based upon how they look, and that is generally how women are perceived in a society. Then there's things like quality time. Spending time. When you spend time with your children, you're showing them you value them and you love them. Because whenever I speak to somebody, I say, "Oh, how are you?" "I'm really busy." Everybody just automatically says they're busy. We get into the habit of responding to things by saying we're busy, because it's become a cliche. But the reality is, people perceive that they're busy, but when you give time to somebody, they're really appreciative of it, more than money. And actually, sometimes you give people the option, either give this money to this charity or give your time. Most people say, I'd rather give money, because time is considered more important than even money. So when you give time to your children, you put away the mobile phones, you spend on doing an activity with them, just you and them, you build a relationship and you show them that you love them. I'm going to give up time for you because you're my son, I love you. You're my daughter, I love you. I'm spending time with you because of that. Giving gifts. So the first three are foundational, are hugely important ways of communicating love to our children. The last two are add-ons. Giving gifts are important, but here we don't mean gifts as in very expensive things, but it means like gifts that convey that you love them. So for example, you go on a business trip, you come back, and you bring them back something very, not expensive, something very small, but then they think, look, my father remembered me. He was on this trip, he was very busy, but he remembered me. Acts of service are things that you do for your children that are like cooking their favorite meal, or fixing their bike when it's broken, or redecorating their bedroom, or putting together a bookshelf in their room so they can put their books up. Those sort of things that you do for your children are services that they want and they see as valuable and important, and that is a way of conveying love to them. But the first three are most important. As fathers, we need to show love to our children in way, and there's lots of details around this. There's a huge book that talks about the 5 languages of love, but we don't have time to cover that in any great detail today. We're going to talk about disrupting normalization. Now, what is the definition of normal? how do things in any society become normal? Yes.
Really nothing, because Allah didn't make us normal, because everybody had their own
Okay.
differences, so none of us can be normal.
Okay.
Because Allah made us all different.
Okay, good. But in every, like for example, in a society, like, you know, how was it that, you know, before the pandemic, none of us were used to wearing masks. None of us would wear masks for anything. And then suddenly everybody started to wear masks. How could that become so normal so quickly? How did things become, yeah. Okay. So, okay, they don't want to spread it, and so people start to wear it. But one of the things it teaches us is that things become normal, yeah, and widespread when people start to do the same action consistently around us. Yeah? When you see lots of people doing something around you consistently, and people accept that as the way to do things, that's when normal becomes formed. Yeah? When society changed from, let me give you another example. Let me give you an example. Imagine a child is used to drinking orange juice every morning. So the family always has orange juice in their fridge, and every single morning the child drinks orange juice. Now imagine one day that child is visiting his cousin's house, and he stays over the night. He comes down in the morning thinking, okay, I'm going to have my daily glass of orange juice, which everybody drinks for breakfast. And then the family, he sits next to his cousin and says, okay, where's the orange juice? He goes, no, we don't drink orange juice, we drink apple juice in the morning. Now he starts to think, oh, that's strange. I thought everybody drinks orange juice. So now his idea of what is normal has changed. Okay, some people have orange juice, some people have apple juice. The reality is that most of us and the surroundings around us affects the way we see things as normal. The way children are exposed to LGBT characters on TV, yeah, that builds an idea of normal within their minds. This is normal, yeah. Today, they don't use the word normal anymore regarding this. They use the word usualization. That things become in the background accepted as being normal. That you don't even have to question it, yeah. There's really important things we understand. Most people do what they do because most people do what they do. Yeah? The reality is most people behave the way they do, dress the way they do, because most people do it that way. And especially in a society where there aren't really any fixed norms, especially if someone's not from a religious background. Their idea of what morality is now in flux. It's whatever most people do. So the reality is you ask somebody, why do you dress the way that you dress? Because everybody dresses like that. My friends dress like that. What's wrong with that? Normal is what people understand to be normal given the environment in which they live. Yes.
So you're saying that if we do one thing over and over again, it's going to become normal. And then if we see our own surroundings, that people are doing it differently, then we will just be adjusted to that thing.
Yeah, that's right. So the reality is that firstly, we can be affected by seeing people around us doing things again and again, and that builds our understanding of normal. But if we keep doing things again and again, also that builds our understanding of normal. But the reality is that our understanding of normal can change. So for example, somebody is used to taking and giving usury, interest, riba, yeah? And then they come across an ayah or a hadith that is forbidden. Now their understanding of what is normal now changes. That, I saw this as normal living in this society, but now I think this is not normal. A non-Muslim who becomes Muslim, whose idea of what normal is eating bacon, drinking alcohol, doing whatever you want. Now that normal is changed to a new normal now because his idea of his purpose in life and the rules governing how he lives his life have changed. And so now his idea of normal becomes changed. But the reality is most people do what they do because most people do what they do. We imitate, yeah? Unless somebody has a clear idea of what morality is or what good and bad is, most people just imitate other people. Most children just want to fit in. That's why peer pressure is so dangerous. A child in a school with his friends. It could be a very good child whose behavior is good, but he's with a group of friends who steal, he'll end up stealing. A group of friends who, swear, he'll end up swearing. Yeah, the Prophet said you are on the deen of your friends, yeah, of your close friends. The reality is we recognize that the environment around us affects us. And the pull for wanting to fit in is so strong for lots of people, especially for children. They end up doing things which is out of character. They would not normally want to do, but because other children do it that way, they do it. Yeah, yes.
But then, if you know the difference between good and bad, and
Yeah.
you can choose like good friends and
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
bad people. So,
Very good.
So you have so I think that schools should actually teach it in like the beginning, so then people actually know an understanding of good friends and bad friends.
Yeah. Okay, good. There's a real effort to usualize LGBTQ relationships, and we can see that where your children are watching TV and they are watching their favorite character on TV. Now, the way that these programs on TV, especially soaps, the way that they're designed is that you build an emotional connection to the characters. And that emotional connection makes you want to come back and back. Again, when that character is in danger, you feel like you're in danger. When that character is happy, you're happy. When the character is sad, you're sad. And so effectively, you become emotionally connected to those characters. Children become emotionally connected to those characters. So when that person says, oh, I identify as gay or lesbian or whatever, now that makes it difficult now for that child to think, okay, in my background, we don't believe this is acceptable, but my favorite character is like this, and it almost slowly plugs away at their sensitivity towards that thing, and it becomes more acceptable unless they have a very clear idea of what is right and wrong, what is from Islam, what is acceptable and not acceptable. We can disrupt the normalization process by ensuring our children understand their purpose in life and the connection between their purpose in life and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed and disallowed certain actions and said certain actions are good and certain actions are bad. Now, where do our children learn about things like sexual relationships and LGBTQ? Where do they learn about it? Someone said school here. Where else? Social media. Where else? Computer games. Where else? Friends. Phones. Friends. Yeah. Why didn't anybody say the home? Why is it that the first thing we say, yeah, it should be the home? Because the reality is, a lot of the times we feel that we can't talk about it in the home for whatever reason. Yeah, and we can't talk about these issues, and then that means that all of our children's ideas about these things are being shaped outside of the home. The place that we can really shape these ideas and behaviors in our children is the only place we decide not to shape our children, not to have those discussions. And sometimes we gotta say, look, reality is if our children don't hear it from us, where are they hearing it from? Where are their norms being shaped? Where are their values being shaped? And so we've got to ask ourselves that question. You know, our children will come across all these identities. And you know, I was watching before I came, I was watching this live webinar, and it said Islam's view about homosexuality. And you know what Islam's view about homosexuality is? Islam has nothing to say about homosexuality. The Quran has nothing to say about homosexuality. Now, what do you now? If I said that to you, how would you respond? Somebody adults. The Quran has nothing to say about homosexuality. The reason why I say this is because homosexuality has a very specific definition. It comes from a worldview which is built around so many falsehoods that, you know, the reality is, look, one simple thing. The people of Lut alayhi salam were driven by desires to engage in actions that nobody before them engaged in. Some of the Sahaba would say, unless Allah spoke to us about this Quran, I could never imagine that two men would do this together. I couldn't imagine this is possible because it's so inconceivable, so disgusting. The reality is the people of Lut alayhi salam were punished because they went with men rather than with women. Yeah? And Lut alayhi salam was saying to them, why don't you, instead of doing this action, this fahisha, this evil action, Go and speak, go and marry and live lives with the women of our town. I'll take it at the end, just because we just got very little time. You know, we have a situation where there's a disconnect. The people of Lut were driven by desires that affected their behavior. Today, this whole idea of homosexuality is built upon identity, which is different from that time. That's what I believe. You know, this idea that we can equate these people to people of Lut is not the same thing. They're doing a similar act, but there is a whole identity around that. And what identity means? Identity means that they believe in the West that everybody has a sexuality. Either you're heterosexual or homosexual. When did this word homosexuality first get used? Guess which year? Yes.
1993?
No, but earlier than that. Not much earlier, but earlier than that. Different century. So it's 1863. Yeah, 1863. This idea of homosexuality. It came about by Karl Maria Benny. He was an activist who identified as being attracted to other men, and he came up with this idea. He said before that, the word that was used in Europe and in the world was sodomy, sodomites. The person who engaged in sodomy, these are sodomites. And so he wanted to come up with a word that was much more acceptable. So he said, we should start using this word homosexuality. And he wrote a letter to his friend, and he said homosexuality should be used rather than, we should try and get people to use the word homosexuality. And who was the person who first came up with this term heterosexuality? It was the same person. The reality is, from the time of Adam alayhi salam till now, till then, you didn't have to have a name for something which was so natural, or normal. But he came up with this idea that sexuality is always is something internal within a person that affects their behavior, but it's not behavior that is changeable. In most people, it's something that is from birth. This is pre-genetics. So the idea of homosexuality and heterosexuality means it's something that is internal within you that makes you either act in one way or another. Either you are attracted to men or women, and that's not something that can change. The Islamic worldview says that every behavior is changeable. Every desire can be either acted upon or can be ignored. A behavior or a desire doesn't force you to act. But when you speak to somebody in Western way, and that's why we should say, whenever we say Islam says this about homosexuality, no. Islam says this about sodomy. Yeah? Islam says this about liwat, which is what the scholars use as a term to describe these acts. But Islam never talked about identity. So when I say to scholars, don't even say, what does Islam say about homosexuality? Islam says nothing about homosexuality. Homosexuality is a made-up term that comes with a very clear definition about people that is not in line with the reality of people. People are driven by desires, and they either can act upon those desires or not. People can can do an action or not. Now the action doesn't define who somebody is. Yes, brother, I know, brother. Yeah? The action doesn't define who somebody is, and a desire does not define who somebody is. Yeah, we are free of this idea that we are forced to behave in a particular way. So we should not use these terms, homosexuality, heterosexuality, gay, lesbian, as though they're real. Yeah. Now, okay, I won't go through this, but I'll say that there's some things I want to talk about. You know, when we were growing up, we had this idea that pig is bad, because everyone around us used to say pig is bad. I remember when I was in school, people used to say, don't say pig, say P-I-G, don't say pig, because pig is so disgusting, say P-I-G. And we built a hatred of eating pig. If anybody ever bought anything that's pig bacon, pork bacon to us, we would say, that's disgusting, I don't want to drink it. Even alcohol, the way alcohol is spoken about in our homes, we would never want to approach alcohol. The reality was that in the homes, people would speak about alcohol, but not even about drugs in the same way. So some Muslims would be taking drugs, but said, "I'll never touch alcohol." The reality is, though, I'm saying that we build negative associations between things based on how we speak about them. If we want to build negative associations between things, actions, then we need to speak about them in that negative way. Now, I know we say to people, look, when we meet people in the street who identify as gay, we treat them well. But we should also say to our community, these actions are completely haram. Not only haram, but they're disgusting. There's something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed the people for. Yeah? The action of liwat is a reason why Allah destroyed an entire nation for. In a punishment that He never gave to any other people, because He was so displeased with them. And we just speak to our children in a very clear way that this act is an act of, is not love. It's not love, it's an act of animalistic, in an animalistic way, is disgusting. And so we need to build that in our children, that negative association. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, La takrabu zina, do not even approach zina. He doesn't say don't commit zina, because the acts towards it are also should be blocked in order to stop, because the path to zina doesn't start here, doesn't start with zina, it starts before that. I want to go through certain things, we need to teach our children about lowering the gaze. We need to teach our children about not being in khalwa, in seclusion with a man and woman being in seclusion together. We need to teach our children that, sexual desires are externally created. They're not internal drives. Yeah. So when the things that you expose yourself to, the things that you see and watch, incite the desires. And so in order to prevent the inciting of desires, don't keep your gaze down. Don't watch things or don't see things. Don't gaze upon things which are forbidden, because that incites the desires. When you do an act which is displeasing to Allah, do tawbah straight away. We need to teach our children tawbah as an act which cuts into the normalization of sin. When somebody sins and they make tawbah straight away, they are saying to Allah, I'm angry that I did this sin, and I'm sorry, oh Allah, that I did this sin. I will not do it again. And you recognize it as a sin. When people stop making tawbah, the ability to normalize sin becomes increased. Lots of people end up saying there's nothing wrong in being gay or being lesbian. These things that they say is because they have never, because their desire overtook them to such an extent where they never considered that to be wrong in the first place, and then they started to find a way to justify that sin. Okay, this is very important. I'll end with this. Yeah? A Messenger of Allah says, whoever seeks to be chaste, Allah will make him chaste. Whoever seeks to be independent of means, Allah will make him independent of means. And whoever strives to be patient, Allah will make him strive to be patient. You be whatever you want to be. Yeah, you be whatever you want to be. Nobody can force you to be this or that. You say, I want to be a person of Jannah, you will be a person of Jannah. The positivity around the messages you send to yourself end up being what you want to be. And so don't allow people to mold who you want to be. Shape what you want to be based upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says a believer, how a believer behaves, and through the Messenger of Allah's example, seek to be that. Yeah, I won't go into anything else because we haven't got time for this. We'll talk about this another time, inshallah. But I'll end it there so that we've got time for questions, inshallah. So do you want to?
Can someone collate the questions in the ladies? There are papers and pens there, so please write the questions. And one volunteer female will come down with all the papers with the questions, and the Sheikh will answer all those questions, inshallah.
No, we'll give this mic to the ladies and they will ask the question. We'll start.
Okay, yeah, at the back, brother, at the back. I'll repeat the question. It'll be fine.
We've heard cases of children becoming homosexuals or identifying as other. What I want to ask, and I think you already alluded to this, is that those cases that you've come across, is it from the perspective of the household, are they coming from families that are broken or affected in some sort of way, or are they coming from households?
Yeah. So the brother asked a question that, families where a child starts to identify as gay. Now, what is happening in those homes that you think contributes to that? And I think, although it's not every single situation, but most of the times where I've dealt with cases and there's lots of evidence, even though this is not politically correct to say, the reality is, especially for boys and even for girls, a lot of it comes down to the relationship between the father and the child. Sometimes the son seeks to, because the son doesn't feel as though they're loved in the home, they seek out that love. Yeah, I speak to, for example, this brother who helps Muslims who are struggling with same-sex attraction. They don't identify as gay, but they are people who say, look, I have this attraction and I'm trying to stay away from it because I know this is forbidden, this is not allowed in Islam. And so they will say that, look, sometimes these people, they just want to be shown love because they've had a lack of love in their home. Yeah, they want somebody to hug them, not in a sexual way, but in a way that shows that they are valued. And you know, one of the things that we've got to do is in the home, as I said, fathers have got to show physical love to their children and have got to tell their children that they love them. But secondly, also, you know, as a community, we've got to show love to our brothers. Yeah, you know, the fact that this idea that if you love your brother, tell him, is from the prophetic sunnah. The fact that we hug each other, the fact that we don't have any problems with that in our culture. In the everyday society, if a man, like once I came to this masjid, I met the imam and he was holding my hand. And I felt very uncomfortable by that because, you know, we're living in a society, holding someone's hand has a particular connotation. But the reality is this is a show of love. You know, so the main thing that fathers can do, the best thing you can do for your sons and your daughters is to show physical love to your children. Yeah, this is a real thing that's missing in the household, something that we need to do as a way of counteracting some of the voids in our children's lives, the emptiness that they'll feel if their fathers don't love them. They'll seek to find that in relationships with other men as they grow up. So we've got to show our children that we love them. And I think that's one of the main things that we can do. Apart from that is get them to build a strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that they build up the spiritual stores in order to withstand some of these fitnas that they're going to come across.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
It's also important, maybe you can correct me if you're wrong, on this, that I think the household really has to be led by the man.
So one minute, sister. Yes.
I think it's quite important that, as you said, that the family unit has always been attacked. And I think the family structure on a more macro level has also been attacked as well.
Yes.
It's very important that the man should be the head of the household. If the head of the household is affected by this sort of thing or is manipulated in any way, then the whole sort of family unit crumbles. So I think it's very important nowadays that there's a lot of problems that from a relationship point of view where the man fears repercussions of speaking out or speaking the truth even within his own family unit. So I think that's also something that contributes to it.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll be taking 2 questions at a time from downstairs and then 2 from ladies. So the second person here, can you please ask your question as well? And then Brother Yusuf will answer. Then we'll ask the ladies to ask 2 questions as well.
Okay. Yes.
My one is more to do with timing. One is when is the right time to start talking about Allah? It's always about like death. My son right now, I'm not talking about death much because he's only 5. You know, but I'm talking about Allah, but not death itself. The timing of talking about sexuality, genders, and so on. You know,
yes.
Sex education. When is the timing?
Yes. Good. So the brother asked about the timing for having these discussions. So issues around connection to Allah, they should obviously, as I said, they should be started, like you said, all the time. Connecting them to things that the creation of Allah all the time, so they realize they are created by Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who tells us what is good and bad. He defines for us how to live our lives. The Quran is a book from Allah, and that tells us how to live our lives as well. The issue about other discussions, now those discussions, a lot of those will be dependent upon the context of your child. If a child goes to a state school, you've got to be able to have these discussions with them before they have them in school. So if they're discussing sexual body parts in year 1, they're discussing about LGBTQ families in year 2, then we need to discuss that much earlier than we would have liked. Unfortunately, that's the case now. So that context, your children's friends, their exposure to these ideas, all of these will have an impact on when you have those discussions with them. But I think it's really important that we build those foundational concepts first, and then we build an idea of the family from the relationship between the father and the mother in the household, and we build the positive values before we talk about things we don't believe. So we talk about, we role model the family structure, and we we talk to our children about the importance of families. Even from a young age, say, look, when you're older and you have children, what would you name them? Yeah, even that builds the expectation that they're going to be fathers and mothers one day. Yeah, they're going to have children, and that builds positive expectations for them. These sort of small things that you do with them are important. But I said there's no fixed time to say you discuss this at 5 or 6 or 7. It's really about how your children will be exposed to this, whether in schools or through friends, and getting to them before they get to our children. We've got two questions from upstairs. Sister, please go ahead and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. What I want to say, Jazakallah khair for the lecture today and workshop today, but I think this is obviously aiming at parents. I know there's been children here as well, but I think there needs to be a smaller request, is that we can have a workshop for teens and children for them to come, because if you realise that our children of all ages, and these relationship this education has been given in schools every year, and it's for free. So
yes.
They're being exposed through that. They're being exposed through social media, friends. So I think we do need to we need to have a workshop for aiming for young children or teens to come to the mosque, to give them direction. I think it's not enough.
Yes.
Parents give it.
Yeah, so you're right. So in terms of on that issue, in terms of what I'm doing is actually I'm trying to develop a maktab program, and I'm in touch with makatib across the country who really want to implement something in their maktabs that covers this. And I think a workshop, you're right, a workshop is in the masjid is important, but a one-off one is probably not what we need. We need a whole series of them in order that children build an understanding of their foundations, build understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the one who defines for us what is good and bad, and then builds these discussions that almost dissect all of the things that they're going to hear in schools about LGBTQ and about sexual relationships in a way which is in line with our values. So I'm trying to develop that resource. I'm trialing some aspects of that just to get an idea of ages. And actually, I was thinking about ages, and we need to start earlier, unfortunately, than we would like. Yeah. So we need to aim at, and actually teenage children it's too late. We probably need to aim at 7 to 10-year-olds. Yeah. Even maybe even 6 to 10-year-olds, unfortunately, because of the reality of the exposure that our children are getting in schools and in popular culture. But yeah, so our solution for that, we can definitely do some sort of workshop, but we're trying to build some sort of longer-term program in the form of a maktab program that maktabs can deliver to children in an easy way, inshallah.
It's just like I came here alone, but I don't think if I brought my 12-year-old son here, it was more towards an adult. It wasn't suitable for a 12-year-old. I'm not saying he wouldn't have understood.
Yeah.
I think the target wasn't. So.
Yeah. But the point, one of the things is, I think it's really important, that I know parents need support, but parents also recognize that they are, from the perspective of Islam, they are the primary educators of their children. They are the ones who are with their children all the time. And even the best workshop or program can't fill the gaps of a lack of tarbiyah in the home. And so what we've got to do is, I think we've got to really in the community build this idea that there's almost a series of small things that we can do in our homes to build strong families, and part of that is building a strong foundation in our children. Part of that is about loving our children, and part of that is about having open discussions and enabling our children to come to us, asking us questions about even things which are uncomfortable. But I'm sure we can have more detailed conversations about this later. There's a question, I think, is this a question from upstairs, from the sisters? How would you suggest we engage with the primary school initially? Should we speak to their class teacher or contact someone more senior? What exactly should we ask initially? So I think the main thing we should do here is just asking questions. Asking questions like, can you show me the resources? What are you teaching in different year groups? How are you taking into account the religious background of my children when you're talking about these subjects in schools? These sort of questions are just very simple questions that when you ask these questions, you say to the school that I'm concerned about this, I'm interested about this, usually schools will say, if parents don't ask them questions about this, they'll come to the conclusion that parents are not worried about this, not concerned about this. And so we need to convey to schools that we're concerned about this. And I think the main thing is first ask these types of questions. And then ask to see the resources. And then feedback on any resources you think which are inappropriate for the particular age groups that they're targeted at. And say, look, this is what you're going to teach in year 7. I don't, for 7-year-olds, for example, in year 2 or year 3, I don't really think this is appropriate. Yeah? And I haven't engaged the school in a conversation about what is appropriate around the particular resources that they're using. And I think that's the key thing. I think we take 2 more questions from down here and then 2 more questions from upstairs. The brother here.
I really enjoyed talking about describing homosexuality as an identity issue as opposed to the way that it's described previously as an act, basically like that. What's your sort of rebuttal to when people say, well, actually, this is something that's been happening hundreds of years, indeed thousands of years, and if you go back to ancient Greece, did those people not identify as homosexuals? Are you suggesting that only people now are identifying as homosexuals and back then they didn't? So maybe you could just expand on that a little bit, please.
So the brother's asking about how can we say that it's an identity that is also a modern concept when it's always existed throughout different times? Didn't people identify as that? And actually, the ancient Greeks, they were immoral to the core. They had no teachings from religion to temper their desires. They would engage in all sorts of different actions, but they wouldn't see those behaviors as being a defining factor of who they are. They would engage in same-sex relationships, and then they would be engaging in their normal life. Even they understood there was something called normal, and there was something called experimentation. The reality is that from all of time, people have engaged in these actions as a result of desires, but they never. But today we have flags, we have a subculture, we have a language, we have a particular identity that is wrapped around this. Yeah. Now look, the reality is, look, if there was to be like a massive global catastrophe and the population of this country decreased to a very small number, if a group of people in this area had to meet together and say, how do we organize society, and ask the question, how do we understand ourselves, the last thing they would want to identify themselves with is who they're attracted to. Yeah? The idea that people should define their whole identity around who they're attracted to is a really weird idea. It's a strange idea. You could identify yourselves under different things, but to say, I'm attracted to another man, so I'm going to call myself gay, and this is my whole life is about me identifying as this, and so I'm going to hold this flag. This flag represents me. This is my subculture. This is the language I use. This is the particular culture I identify with. It's a whole worldview. The issue of today's LGBTQ is almost like a religion in itself. Yeah, it's a cult in itself. It's like, this is what we believe. And if you don't believe this, you are blaspheming. If you say that people have choice about who they are or who they are attracted to, then you're committing blasphemy. This is almost like a cult or a religion. And so we need to say that there is a huge difference between the idea that people engage in this action, yeah, and the fact that there's a huge new identity around it, and a whole movement around it, and like pride marches with flags, with a language, with a subculture around it. So that's unique. Even today, you talk to people, what is heterosexual and homosexuality? They will argue that homosexuality and heterosexuality were created forms that came out through liberalism. An idea that, because the whole LGBT movement came about by 2 things: by divorcing morality from actions, morality from God, and by removing the sexual instinct from reproduction. And by doing both of those things, that meant that now sexual relationships are no longer defined by God, and sexual relationships are now defined by no longer defined by the natural act that leads to the reproduction and the thriving of the human race, and now it's geared towards pleasure. That's what liberalism brought to the table, and that's a 19th century construct, not a historic one. Another question from the back.
So I would like to understand how you would have reacted to the following situation. So I've got a nephew, I think he's 6 years old, goes to first year. And one day he goes to his dad and says, you know, Dad, I've got this friend who I know since I joined the school like a year ago. I've spent my breaks with him, said he's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
But today he came to school as a girl. And he was wearing dresses and so that's and obviously he said he was like super confused, like how can a boy turn to a girl?
Yeah.
So and we were all kind of like clueless how to react or like how to respond to this. So what would you have how would you have explained that?
This is with a young child like that, I think he's answered the question himself. He's almost answered the question himself. He's said that this is ridiculous. Yeah. I don't think you need to even come up with some huge commentary about it. You say, what do you think about that? Yeah. How do you think about do you think somebody can turn from a boy to a girl? And the fitrawi idea that children have is that this is not possible. Yeah, this idea that there's a boy and a girl, they are fixed things that can't change. Even if you change them visibly, deep within a person, that person is male and female through their chromosomes. You can't change. You should say that. You should say to your nephew, make dua for him that Allah guides him. Yeah, because he is confused and he's in need of guidance and the mercy of Allah, and so make lots of. 2 questions from upstairs now. Any sisters from upstairs got any questions? Please take the mic. By example.
So sorry, this is a bit of a similar question, but I'm a 14-year-old girl, and my parents taught me the Islamic viewpoint on LGBTQ issues, and I also believe in them. And I'm open with my parents about everything and feel very comfortable to talk to them about things. And I have a really close friend, she's non-Muslim, and she's recently told me that she identifies as gay and gender fluid. My parents have advised me not to discuss any haram topics with her, but otherwise she's a very nice and polite person. But the Muslims in my class, they're not really that nice sometimes. They're into like TikTok and social media and things I'm not interested in. So, and she's very similar to me, has very similar interests. She's very close to me.
Yes.
But yeah, we haven't really talked about it since then. But I'm just wondering, what should my approach be towards talking to her about this? And I'm already talking about it, but she brings it up. And, yeah.
I think if you want the best for your friend, then you should just send her. If you have the relationship with her, give her messages about asking a question like, why do you think we exist on this earth? Yeah, who created us? What purpose? Do you think there's a greater purpose than the ones that people around us, people that tell us about? Get her to start thinking about purpose. The issue is that talking to somebody who doesn't have a foundation by which to appreciate why we do things and why we don't do things, they don't have a particular moral code that comes from God. It's very difficult for you to convince them to do an action or not do an action. But if you can speak to somebody and get them thinking about why they were created, who created them, for what purpose, what is the wider meaning of life, then that can inch her forward to a discussion that then she can appreciate. Then who defines for people how they should live their life? Is it people or God? So I think maybe if you are in a situation that you've got a good relationship with her, inch her towards an understanding about purpose and meaning of her life. That's going to be more beneficial to her than discussing these other issues. But I would say, obviously, be careful about that, because if she starts to live a life that is openly like that, then you might need to think about, is it in your best interest and your interest as a Muslim to be so close to her and to be very close friends with her. And so you've got to make that decision yourself. But I think it seems that you've got very mature head on your shoulders, and alhamdulillah, you seem to have a very clear idea of what you believe as a Muslim. So I'm not really worried about someone like you in terms of in being exposed to these environments. I think you'll find your way through them with very little difficulty. But But keep that relationship with your parents, keep speaking to them, seeking their advice, and inshallah ta'ala, may Allah bless you and keep you steadfast.
Last question from upstairs.
Welcome.
I have a question. So the question is, there are many Muslim teachers like myself who work in mainstream schools, and we are required as per curriculum to deliver lessons on the LGBT issue and RSE lessons. So how do we, in terms of keeping our jobs, but also at the same time teach lessons that are actually against our faith, because it becomes really tricky. We also, at times when I've known in the classroom, we'll try to skip those issues. And how do you actually have Muslim children in your class, but actually try not to say to them this is okay, whereas we are literally held at gunpoint to try and say to these children, these 5-year-olds, that it is okay to be LGBT, showing them materials, showing them books and videos, which we are required to, by the kind of law of the country, or what we're required to teach in schools. That's my predicament.
Do you know, I think, obviously, you're in a very difficult situation. I get this question asked to me a lot by teachers, and I've spoken to lots of teachers who are in a similar situation. I think the thing is, lots of schools are saying that they've got to teach this, which is in line with the law. What they have to teach in line with the law is factual examples of this. They're not teachers. Actually, there's lots of guidance in the government which says teachers should not be speaking about their own personal values about these issues or imposing gender ideology to children. That's not the role of the teachers, and schools are going way too far in this regard. I think really the guidance clearly states to teachers that when they talk about these subjects, they've got to talk about different viewpoints, even different faith viewpoints about this subject. It shouldn't be just talking about saying that this is okay. They say some people believe this is okay, but other people have a different view about them. For example, Muslims or Christians or Jewish people will have a different viewpoint about them, and actually allowing for there to be open dialogue in the class to accept all the different. So I think having a conversation with even the senior leadership team to say, look, what is our role here in discussing these issues, and how far can we accept for children from different backgrounds or different perspectives to speak about what their perspectives are on the issue. But I think from your perspective, if you were to say factually, some people in our society identify as this and that, then that's okay. That's not contributing Islamic your Islamic role, as long as you don't almost celebrate or say this is okay or this is acceptable. Some people say it's okay, but there's some people from different backgrounds who may have problems with this because they have different moral perspectives on these issues, and you're allowed to give that perspective. But I think speak to your head teacher, speak to your senior leadership team about these types of issues. And I think we need to find a way of supporting Muslim teachers in state schools, so that Muslim teachers, because the reality is a lot of Muslim teachers will say, I don't want to carry on in this job, and actually having Muslim teachers as role models in schools, supporting children is hugely important. And if all of our teachers leave the schools, then we no longer have those teachers who are able to be role models for our children and support them in different ways. But it's a very difficult situation, and schools are teaching over and above what the law requires. And really, one of the things that we're doing is actually putting together a report to the government about what's going wrong in schools and how teachers are imposing their personal views on children in a way that goes beyond what is legally allowed. And so we're going to try and publish this within the next 2 weeks, send it to the government, send it to different MPs, and try and get them to understand from the case studies of parents of issues happening in schools, get them to start thinking about what changes need to happen in schools to reflect the fact that things are going wrong in schools and things are going above and beyond what is allowed in schools.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that, thank you for that. I think it is important that Muslim teachers remain in schools so that we can actually provide, be a role model to our children, not just to Muslim children but to all children.
Yes.
But it's very difficult when half your senior leadership team are actually LGBT as well.
Yeah, and that's a problem because, why is it that they're LGBT? Why does that have anything to do with what they're deciding on, what's in the best interest of children? They should be able to divorce, like Muslim teachers are asked to divorce their being Muslim from their everyday teaching every day. Why is it that LGBT teachers are now have to impose their personal views upon children in the classroom? That's just, we need to challenge that and say this is unacceptable. Part of that report will be covering things like this.
I think you've answered that very ably and very aptly. It is something that I just came across before coming today's workshop, and two 15-year-olds told me that 60% of their teachers belong to LGBT community within the school, and those include Muslim teachers as well. So this is something that we have to take on board when we are doing this. May I thank our learned speaker here today. Unfortunately, the time was short. He has only covered half of his delivery. There were topics still to be covered. Inshallah, we will arrange another workshop to follow up on this workshop, and we'll take the remaining topics, inshallah, in the next workshop, hopefully in the next 3 months. So may I thank, on behalf of the congregation and on behalf of the management, Brother Yusuf Patel, for coming over and delivering this lecture. And inshallah, we'll have you back in the Masjid again. Thank you very much for coming.
And if anybody wants the slides, email me and I can send you the slides as well, so there's not a problem. And if you've got any questions,